December 7th, 1941. A date etched into the memory of every American. The morning sun rose over Pearl Harbor, only to be met with the roar of Japanese aircraft, the crash of bombs, and the screams of those caught in a sudden hell. Ships burned, planes plummeted into the harbor, and over 2,400 lives were lost in mere hours. The attack left a nation stunned, a navy reeling, and the world watching as America faced a ruthless, precise, and dangerous enemy. The Pacific, once distant and abstract, had become the very front line of war, and the United States had no choice but to respond. The shock and fury that gripped the nation would soon ignite a transformation in strategy, courage, and determination, shaping the next crucial battles that would decide the fate of the Pacific. As the smoke cleared over Pearl Harbor, commanders in Washington and Hawaii were forced to confront the reality. The American Pacific Fleet was scattered, weakened, and untested in large-scale carrier warfare. Yet within this chaos, a spark of opportunity emerged. The aircraft carriers, still afloat and largely unscathed, would become the centerpiece of America's defense and offense in the Pacific. Leaders like Admiral Chester W. Nimitz understood that victory would not come from numbers alone, but from intelligence, innovation, and precise execution. Every decision, every ship, every plane would count in the days to come. Meanwhile, the Japanese Empire advanced across the Pacific with astonishing speed. From the Philippines to the Dutch East Indies, their forces claimed islands, harbors, and strategic outposts, each serving as a stepping stone for further expansion. Their strategy was clear: destroy the American fleet, dominate the Pacific skies, and isolate Australia and New Zealand. Confidence and preparation allowed Japan to assume the initiative, but the United States, despite being on the defensive, had advantages that few could see. Knowledge of the enemy, innovation in cryptography, and the courage of young men ready to fly into the unknown would soon turn the tide. In the months following Pearl Harbor, the United States undertook an extraordinary effort to rebuild the Pacific Fleet. Shipyards operated day and night, repairing battleships and constructing new carriers. Aircraft factories churned out planes with unprecedented speed. Young pilots trained relentlessly, mastering complex maneuvers, learning to fly in coordinated formations, and preparing for a battle that could arrive at any moment. Every officer, sailor, and pilot understood that the coming months would demand skill, courage, and unwavering resolve. The fleet, though smaller than the Japanese Armada, was disciplined, adaptable, and ready to leverage every advantage that intelligence could provide. Intelligence became the hidden weapon of the Pacific Campaign. In Hawaii, cryptographers at Station Hypo, led by Lieutenant Commander Joseph Rochefort, worked tirelessly to intercept and decode Japanese messages. Long nights were spent poring over symbols and transmissions, searching for patterns in a language designed to conceal secrets. For months, the Japanese code remained unbroken, leaving the United States guessing their enemy's intentions. But a breakthrough came when the Japanese referred to Midway as decisive confrontation. By the first hours of June 4, 1942, the stage was set. The Americans had leveraged every tool at their disposal: intelligence, training, strategy, and discipline. The Japanese, confident in their planning and naval superiority, were sailing into a trap they could not foresee. The Pacific War, which had seemed an overwhelming challenge for the United States, now hinged on the courage of individuals and the precision of coordinated action. The coming battle would test every lesson learned, every ounce of bravery, and every decision made in the months following Pearl Harbor. This was the prelude to Midway, a story of preparation, foresight, and tension. The winds of history were shifting, and the young men who would fly, fight, and survive over the coming days were poised to change the course of the Pacific War forever. The calm before the storm held its own weight, filled with the silent knowledge that the next few hours could echo through generations, shaping the future of nations and the legacy of those who dared to act when the world watched and waited. While the Pacific slept under the early June sun, another battle was raging far from the waves, a battle of minds, ciphers, and silent calculation. In cramped offices at Station Hypo in Pearl Harbor, Lieutenant Commander Joseph Rochefort and his team of cryptographers worked tirelessly, scanning Japanese transmissions for patterns that could reveal the enemy's plans. Day after day, night after night, they labored, poring over symbols, codes, and radio signals, aware that the created a situation where the Americans could dictate the terms of the battle, despite being outnumbered and outgunned. June 3, 1942, arrived with the fleet ready and anticipation mounting. The Americans had to trust in their knowledge, their preparation, and their skill. Pilots mentally rehearsed attack runs, sailors familiarized themselves with defensive patterns, and commanders reviewed every contingency. Across the vast expanse of the Pacific, two mighty fleets were converging, yet only one had the foresight to see what lay ahead. The strategy was daring: lure the Japanese into striking Midway, then unleash the American carriers at precisely the right moment. Timing was everything. The pilots, flying machines of metal and courage, would become the instruments through which intelligence and strategy turned into action. Every dive, every torpedo run, every bomb drop had to synchronize with the broader plan. The fate of Midway, and perhaps the Pacific, would hinge on the execution of this intricate design. In the final hours before the engagement, the tension aboard the American carriers was nearly unbearable. Sailors and officers moved with efficiency, maintaining calm while understanding the stakes. Pilots checked their planes repeatedly, running through procedures learned in months of training, while the cryptographers continued their ceaseless work, monitoring Japanese transmissions for the slightest deviation from expectations. The calm, focused preparation contrasted sharply with the chaos that awaited, a calm forged in discipline and intelligence. As June 4th approached, the fleets drew closer, separated by miles of open ocean. Yet the stage was set for a confrontation that would become legendary. The Americans, guided by the insight of cryptographers and the strategic vision of their leaders, were ready to confront the might of the Japanese Navy. Knowledge, courage, and meticulous planning converged to create a force capable of altering the course of history. The outcome, though uncertain, rested on the skill and bravery of those poised to act, and on the invisible hands of those who had broken the codes that defined the enemy's intentions. This was the world behind the front lines, the hidden struggle of intellect and foresight that shaped the coming clash. The cryptographers, the planners, and the commanders had done everything they could to prepare for what was coming. The stage was set, the pieces in place, and the Pacific held its breath. When the first planes roared into the skies over Midway, it would be more than a battle. It would be the manifestation of human ingenuity, courage, and precision, a test of strategy against raw force. The story of Midway was not only about planes and ships, it was about minds at work, decisions made under pressure, and the power of knowledge in shaping the fate of nations. The dawn of June 4, 1942 broke over the vast expanse of the Pacific, painting the horizon with gold and orange. The calm waters belied the tension that gripped the sailors and pilots aboard the American carriers. Every gun was manned, every plane fueled, and every pilot briefed for the mission that would define the future of the Pacific War. The Japanese fleet, moving with confidence and precision, had no inkling that they were sailing into a carefully orchestrated trap, where intelligence, timing, and courage would converge. At first light, American aircraft lifted into the sky. Dive bombers, torpedo planes, and fighters climbed steadily, engines roaring and propellers slicing through the morning air. The pilots knew the stakes. Success meant crippling the enemy. Failure could mean annihilation. Over the horizon, the Japanese carriers appeared as dark silhouettes against the rising sun, each a fortress bristling with anti-aircraft fire and waiting planes. The initial strikes were brutal and costly. Torpedo squadrons flew directly into a hailstorm of fire from the decks below. Many planes were destroyed before they could drop their payloads. Pilots were forced to ditch into the ocean, some rescued by desperate comrades. Yet these early attacks served a vital purpose. They drew the Japanese fighters down, clearing the way for the dive bombers who would soon execute the plan that had been months in preparation. The dive bombers approached with precision. Each plane maneuvered carefully, coordinating with its squadron to maximize impact. The first bombs hit the deck of the Akagi, tearing through hangars and planes, igniting fires that quickly spread. Simultaneously, The Kaga and Soryu were struck by bombs in near-perfect synchronization. Explosions ripped through fuel stores, smoke billowed into the sky, and the Japanese fleet was thrown into chaos. In those critical minutes, the balance of power in the Pacific shifted irreversibly. Amid the chaos, individual heroism defined the battle. Lieutenant Commander John Waldron led his torpedo squadron with unwavering determination, flying into the enemy's flak with a courage that would inspire generations. Though most of his squadron was destroyed, their sacrifice diverted Japanese defenses, creating the opportunity for the dive bombers to inflict catastrophic damage. Ensign George Gay, the sole survivor of his torpedo squadron, witnessed the destruction from the air, later recounting the surreal scene of fire, smoke, and confusion below. The Japanese, taken by surprise, scrambled to respond. Fighter planes launched in waves to intercept American attackers, but coordination faltered amidst the fire and confusion. Communication breakdowns and damaged ships compounded the chaos. On the decks, sailors fought fires, manned guns, and attempted to launch aircraft to defend their carriers, but the momentum had shifted against them. The meticulous planning, intelligence, and courage of the American forces now dictated the flow of the battle. Throughout the morning, the engagement raged across miles of ocean. Dive bombers returned for repeated strikes. Torpedo planes pressed attacks despite overwhelming odds, and fighter cover protected key assets. Each decision in the air or on deck had immediate consequences. A single missed signal or miscalculated maneuver could spell disaster, yet American coordination held. The combination of intelligence American pilots regrouped, carriers maneuvered to consolidate positions, and the full extent of the victory began to crystallize. Thousands of lives had been lost, hundreds of aircraft destroyed, yet the strategic advantage had shifted decisively to the United States. The Battle of Midway, fought over a few hours in the skies and seas of the Pacific, had become a turning point that would reverberate through the remainder of the war. The battle's outcome was a testament to the integration of intelligence, planning, and courage. Knowledge gained from cryptography allowed commanders to anticipate enemy movements. Training and preparation enabled pilots and sailors to execute complex maneuvers under fire. Heroism at every level amplified the effects of strategy, ensuring that the Americans could overcome an enemy who had seemed invincible just days before. Midway proved that war could be won not only by numbers or firepower, but by insight, execution, and bravery. In the aftermath of the engagement, the scale of destruction was clear. The Japanese carriers were lost, along with hundreds of planes and experienced pilots. The United States had sacrificed ships and lives, but had delivered a strategic victory that would halt Japanese expansion. The Pacific, once dominated by an enemy confident in its supremacy, now became a theater where America could act, plan, and strike back. The 5 critical minutes that had decided the battle underscored the importance of timing, coordination, and courage. A lesson that would echo through naval history. As night fell over the Pacific, the survivors reflected on the magnitude of what had occurred. Sailors tended to the wounded, pilots recounted their experiences, and commanders assessed the next steps. The human cost was immense, yet the triumph was undeniable. The Battle of Midway was not just a clash of fleets and aircraft. It was the culmination of months of preparation, intelligence gathering, and extraordinary bravery. The stage was set for the next phase of the Pacific War, where lessons learned and momentum gained would guide the American advance toward victory. This was the battle that redefined naval warfare, highlighting the decisive role of aircraft carriers, intelligence, and human courage. It was a story of strategy executed flawlessly, of young men facing extraordinary odds, and of a moment in history where preparation and bravery changed the world. The Battle of Midway was over, but its legacy, lessons, and heroism would endure, remembered for generations as the turning point that saved the Pacific from Japanese domination. As the smoke and flames rose from the burning decks of the Japanese carriers, the Pacific skies were filled with the roar of engines and the smell of gunpowder. By late morning, the tide had shifted irrevocably. The once formidable Japanese fleet, confident in its planning and execution, now struggled to regroup amidst chaos. Ships burned, sailors scrambled for survival, and pilots maneuvered through skies thick with smoke and fire. The Americans, though outnumbered, had seized the initiative, and every action reinforced their newfound advantage. The Japanese attempted to counterattack. From the decks of Hiryu and remaining vessels, waves of torpedo bombers and fighters were launched, aiming to strike the American carriers. Anti-aircraft fire from the decks of Enterprise, Hornet, and Yorktown tore through the attackers, yet some planes managed to hit their targets, causing damage and loss. The Americans pressed on, undeterred, coordinating attacks and defenses with precision honed through months of training and strategic planning. In the air, heroism defined the battle. Pilots repeatedly dived into flak and enemy fire, dropping torpedoes and bombs with lethal accuracy. Lieutenant Commander Wade McCluskey led his dive bombers with determination, finding the Japanese carriers and striking decisively. The timing of their attacks, synchronized across multiple squadrons, ensured maximum damage. Smoke and fire engulfed the enemy decks, leaving the Japanese forces disoriented and unable to mount an effective defense. On the decks below, sailors worked tirelessly under extreme conditions. Fires were fought with buckets, hoses, and sheer willpower. Damaged guns were repaired, while explosions echoed across the decks. Pilots were assisted into planes, ammunition restocked, and coordination maintained despite the chaos. Every individual's contribution mattered, and the collective effort amplified the effect of the American strategy. Courage, skill, and perseverance turned potential disaster into decisive action. By midday, the Japanese carriers Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and later Hiryu were ablaze, abandoned, or sinking. The battle highlighted that success in war depended as much on human resolve and insight as on firepower. As the hours passed, the Japanese fleet began to retreat, moving away from in a turning point of history. The destruction of 4 Japanese carriers and the halting of their offensive momentum shifted the balance of power in the Pacific, signaling the beginning of a new phase in the war. The Battle of Midway, and the moments that turned the tide, became a testament to the integration of strategy, intelligence, and heroism. Knowledge gained from codebreaking enabled commanders to anticipate enemy movements. The skill, training, and courage of pilots and sailors ensured precise execution under fire. The sacrifices of those who faced overwhelming odds created an outcome that would echo through naval history. The 5 critical minutes, and the actions surrounding them, demonstrated that even in chaos, well-prepared and courageous forces could determine the fate of nations. By the end of the day, the Americans had won not only a battle, but a strategic victory that would shape the Pacific War for years to come. The Japanese retreat marked the end of their expansionist momentum, while the Allies gained confidence, initiative, and the opportunity to plan subsequent offensives. The turning tide at Midway was a story of human courage, meticulous planning, and the decisive application of knowledge. Proof that even against a powerful enemy, preparation and bravery could change history. This pivotal moment in the Pacific became a legend, studied in military academies, recounted in memoirs, and remembered as a defining episode of World War II. It was a day when individual heroism met strategic genius, when intelligence shaped action, and when the courage of ordinary men produced extraordinary outcomes. The Battle of Midway was more than a fight over ships and planes. It was the convergence of human skill, planning, and valor, and the moment when the tide of war finally turned in favor of the United States. As the last embers of burning Japanese carriers faded into the Pacific sky, the magnitude of the Battle of Midway became clear. 4 Japanese carriers were lost: Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, along with hundreds of aircraft and thousands of sailors. On the American side, losses were significant but manageable, with the carrier Yorktown damaged and brave pilots and crews paying the ultimate price. Yet, in the balance of strategy, intelligence, and courage, victory had tilted decisively toward the United States. The Pacific, once a vast expanse dominated by Japanese expansion, now became a stage where the Allies could regain momentum. The strategic implications of Midway were immediate and profound. Japan's offensive capability in the Pacific had been broken. The loss of experienced pilots and carriers meant that their ability to project power across vast ocean distances was severely diminished. The Allies, in contrast, had gained confidence, the initiative, and the opportunity to transition from defense to offense. Every decision made before and during the battle, from cryptographic breakthroughs to tactical execution, had culminated in a moment that would reshape the war in the Pacific. American morale soared in the wake of victory. The news of the triumph spread quickly through military channels and across the home front. Newspapers, radio broadcasts, and newsreels celebrated the heroism and skill that had achieved what seemed impossible. The courage of pilots and sailors inspired a nation still recovering from the shock of Pearl Harbor, proving that preparation, intelligence, and bravery could overcome overwhelming odds. Midway became not just a military victory, but a symbol of resilience and determination. From the Japanese perspective, the defeat was devastating. Naval supremacy, once assumed, was shattered. The loss of carriers and veteran aircrews crippled operational effectiveness, forcing a retreat and recalibration of strategy. Confidence in their expansionist plans was shaken, and the psychological impact reverberated across the Imperial Navy and the Japanese leadership. The Battle of Midway had marked a turning point, signaling the beginning of a shift in the balance of power across the Pacific. Heroism and sacrifice defined the aftermath. Pilots like Ensign George Gay, the sole survivor of his torpedo squadron, recounted the terror and chaos of the skies. Sailors and crewmen on American carriers fought fires, tended the wounded, and ensured the survival of their vessels. Each act, small or large, contributed to the outcome, proving that in war, human courage and resilience are as crucial as strategy and firepower. The legacy of those who fought became immortalized in accounts, memoirs, and historical records. The lessons of Midway extended far beyond the immediate battlefield. Intelligence, particularly code-breaking, had proven to be a decisive force multiplier. The ability to anticipate enemy movements allowed the Americans to strike effectively, even when outnumbered. Coordination between carriers, pilots, and fleet commanders demonstrated the importance of training, planning, and adaptability. The battle reshaped naval warfare, emphasizing aircraft carriers, aerial reconnaissance, every maneuver, and every act of courage contributed to a moment that would echo through generations. The legacy of Midway endures as a testament to the integration of intelligence, courage, and execution. It is remembered in naval academies, recounted in memoirs, and studied as a turning point in military history. The victory demonstrated that even against formidable odds, preparation and bravery could alter the fate of nations. The Pacific War had shifted, and the United States, once reeling from Pearl Harbor, now held momentum and hope. In the final analysis, Midway was a story of people as much as of strategy. It highlighted the importance of foresight, the power of information, and the indomitable spirit of those who faced danger with courage and resolve. The battle reshaped the Pacific, broke Japanese expansion, and set the stage for Allied victories that would follow. The heroism, sacrifice, and skill displayed during those crucial days became immortalized, ensuring that the story of Midway would never be forgotten. It was a triumph of strategy, intelligence, and humanity. A moment when the courage of a few changed the fate of many and forever altered the course of history.